I want to start this off by making one thing clear. I love both The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra. But, as the bad guy in Highlander said,
there can be only one.
Which means it's time to decide once and for all which show about people trying to kill each other with kung fu magic is the best. To do this, I'm going to break the competition down into 6 rounds. Each round asks which show is better at a certain aspect. The show that secures the most rounds wins. This highly scientific method is foolproof. Trust me. We're starting off with one of the most important rounds. Animal sidekicks. It's tradition for the Avatar to have an animal companion. Aang and Korra were lucky enough to have 2 furry accomplices. One for getting around, and the other for being cute and selling merchandise. Let's break this down based on the type of animal, starting with the mobile class first. In one corner, we have Appa, the flying bison. And in the other corner, we have Naga, the polar bear dog. Some pros for Naga are she's good in a fight, doesn't shed as much, and is a lot easier to shelter than Appa. But it's impossible to say she's as effective in terms of transportation. Nothing beats being able to fly from place to place. Polar bear dogs just aren't as cool either. Imagine scientists claimed they discovered a new animal, and then described it as a polar bear, but with big floppy ears. Everyone's first thought would be, that sounds cute. But if scientists claimed to discover a 3-ton bison who can fly, everyone would lose their minds, and then would immediately sell all their airline stock. Winner, Appa. Now it's time to look at the smaller companions. Once again, the last Airbender creature is more useful. Momo, like his buddy Appa, can fly, a skill he uses to save the day multiple times. Momo also seems to get involved more. While rewatching The Last Airbender, I couldn't help but notice that Momo always manages to be in the background doing something funny. Pabu has his share of shenanigans, but he's used more sparingly. The best case for Pabu is he's slightly more adorable than Momo. That's about it though, because despite being named a fire ferret, Pabu can't create fire, which makes him a liar. Sorry Pabu, but we can reopen this conversation if you learn to shoot flames from your body like your genus suggests. Winner, Momo. Overall winner, The Last Airbender by a landslide. Both shows have moments that will make viewers laugh out loud no matter how many times they watch it, meaning this is going to be a tough one. Starting with the OG show, Sokka and Uncle Iroh carried most of the humor for The Last Airbender, but everyone contributed. Some serious highlights include Sokka and Momo getting high off cactus juice, Uncle Iroh eating a poison plant, Azula attempting to flirt, the guy from the Tunnel of Love episode, and of course, the cabbage merchant having his life ruined repeatedly. Meanwhile, Legend of Korra had the combination of Bolin and Varrick for most of its comedic moments.
That would be my darling Eska. Quick question, is this thing fast enough to get away from my crazy waterbending ex-girlfriend?
Why do you think I built this boat?
I think Varrick is the funniest character in either series. He has witty remarks, a touch of sarcasm, and behaves like a Looney Tunes character. If the creators ever bless us with the spin-off shows, I request Varrick get his own miniseries. Preferably one where he travels from exotic location to exotic location, getting into trouble, and then using his brains to get out of it. It's close, but I have to give the edge to Legend of Korra for being the funnier show. What's an Avatar without their squad? Probably dead, because in both shows, the Avatar's friends needed to save them multiple times. So how should we measure which team was better? I figure every member should have these 2 qualities. 1, be able to handle themselves in a fight. 2, be a good hang. I know that's subjective, but I believe the best way to determine if someone is a good hang is to try to imagine what they would be like on a cross-country road trip. Korra's team Avatar had Mako, Bolin, and Asami. All 3 of them could handle themselves in a scruff. Mako and Bolin were pro-benders, and Asami had her weird hand-glove taser thing. Bolin's a class clown. He made everyone laugh and could lighten up any mood.
The revolution has already begun. Chaos is the natural order of all. Whoa.
You see what I did there? I put a sock in it. Literally.
Classic Bolin.
I do what I do.
But using the road trip scenario, I have to imagine spending several hours trapped in close proximity to him would be tiring. Fortunately, his personality is balanced well by his older brother. Mako played the straight man, aka the guy who makes Bolin seem more funny. He's more mellow and not as enjoyable to be around, but you are less likely to get annoyed with him. Another good thing about Mako is he's able to take initiative and make decisions. Have you ever been in a car with a group of friends trying to decide what to eat, but no one will actually pick a place? Everyone just keeps saying, I don't care, I'm down for whatever. Mako is the person who will pick a place so you can get on with your night. The biggest downside to Mako is he's a bit of a player, and if you bring your girlfriend along, let's just say it might be a good idea to keep an eye open. I'll leave it at that. Asami's greatest contribution is being extremely wealthy, allowing the gang to get sweet toys like cars, boats, and airplanes. Think of her as the friend who brings a bunch of snacks on the trip and insists that you take some. This friend is useful in almost any situation. Asami is also extremely supportive and wants to make sure everyone is doing alright. Everyone could use an Asami in their life. Now it's time for the Aang gang. Katara was a world-class waterbender who also acted like the mom of the group. This is normally an annoying trait, but since the group was prepubescent, I would argue that they actually needed a mother figure to make sure that they would occasionally bathe. Sokka provides jokes, a boomerang, and tactical planning. Using our road trip analogy, he's the one who would be in charge of navigation and would organize when and where the pit stops would take place. He's also the one friend that everyone makes fun of, which is a very important role. Toph was arguably the most overpowered character of the show. She never really lost a fight, and learned to metal bend after only a few minutes of trying. Some fans have unfairly accused Korra of being a Mary Sue, but if you're looking for one, it's probably Toph. To the question of would she be a good hang, that's debatable. She was a little gross and also rude to everyone, but everyone seemed to love her regardless, so I mean she couldn't have been that bad, right? I know Zuko did technically join the gang, but it wasn't until the very end of the show, so I'm going to leave him out of this section. I've been going back and forth on this one, and decided ultimately that it was unfair to choose a winner. Both teams did their job well, so it's going to be a tie. This one's going to be a nail-biter, folks. The way Legend of Korra is structured, each season had its own main villain. The first, Amon, was the only one in the series that I would describe as scary. The creepy mask, combined with him always seeming to be in control of every situation, made me fear for Korra's safety every time they were in the same room. Despite being spooky, when we finally learn Amon's backstory, it's hard not to have sympathy for him. A characteristic that makes villains more memorable. Another memorable thing about Amon is the way he goes out. It was a jaw-dropping moment that made me actually look over to my friend and ask if that just happened. Unfortunately, the second season didn't live up to the standards of the first one in terms of villainy. Some may say Unalaq was the main villain, but I'm giving that title to Vaatu, aka the evil giant kite. The biggest issue with Vaatu is it's hard to go from a bloodbender who wants to make everyone equal to the embodiment of chaos who plans on sending the world into an age of darkness for 10,000 years. The stakes were so high they became unrelatable. This was especially true in the finale, when Giant Vaatu and Giant Korra fought in the Bay of Republic City. At that point, the show no longer felt like Avatar to me. Thankfully for everyone, the writers completely redeemed themselves in Season 3 with the introduction of Zahir. He has that special quality that makes a villain truly great. He makes you see his point of view and even agree with him up to a point. When he sucked the air out of the Earth Queen, it was one of those moments where you don't actually believe what you're seeing. I know it was a terrible thing to do, but be honest, weren't you at least a little bit okay with it? Even if your answer is no, you have to at least admit he can make his goals seem reasonable, despite the fact that they are a bit insane. And the fact that he became an airbending master in what feels like a month is truly inspiring. The final season gave us Kuvera, a character who is popular among some fans, but who I personally find extremely boring. All she wants to do is conquer the world. That's it. Nothing we haven't seen from thousands of other villains, both real and fictional. The title for Best Villain in Legend of Korra goes to Zahir. I wonder if his Red Lotus buddies will throw him a party in celebration. Oh wait. While all of Korra's villains were independent of each other, Aang had one main boss he had to defeat, the Fire Lord. But before he could face him, Aang had to deal with some mini-bosses first. In Season 1, I would argue the primary antagonist was Admiral Zhao. Zuko was more prevalent, but it was obvious even then he was a good kid who was put in a bad situation by his pops. Meanwhile, Zhao demonstrated nothing but pure malice the entire season. But despite being a complete tool, he wasn't very accomplished. His greatest achievement was killing a defenseless koi fish, literally shooting fish in a barrel. And even then, it didn't end up mattering 10 minutes later. In Season 2, things heated up with the introduction of Azula, aka the Sister from Hell. Azula did two things that stand out. First of all, Azula, with only the help of her friends / hostages, Mai and Ty Lee, single-handedly took down the Earth Kingdom, something that no one could do for 100 years. It might be the most impressive thing any character has done in either show, and she couldn't have done it without that signature Azula confidence.
For 100 years, the Fire Nation has hammered away at Ba Sing Se from the outside, but now we're on the inside, and we can take it by ourselves.
Gosh, you're so confident. I really admire that about you.
Secondly, she ignored the unwritten rule that bad guys follow, which is sitting back and allowing the hero to take their time when transforming. Azula saw an opening and she actually killed the Avatar. If it hadn't been for Katara's magic water, the show would have ended on a much sadder note. The thing I love most about Azula is she isn't one layer deep. We see at the end being ruthless in order to gain the love of her father has actually broken her, because she knows her mother would have never approved the person she became. It's the first time I can remember seeing a character break down like this in a kid's show, and it stuck with me. Speaking of Azula's father, in Season 3 we finally got to see the main boss in action. After being hyped up for 3 real-time years, it wouldn't have been surprising if the Fire Lord was a disappointment. But thankfully for everyone, he lived up to our expectations. Fire Lord Ozai, or as he prefers to be called, the Phoenix King, which on a side note is a pretty dumb name, was basically Hitler with superpowers. His genocidal nature and bad facial hair are what give it away. With the help of Sozin's Comet, Ozai nearly beat Aang, until the Avatar State Ex Machina came to the rescue. But other than being powerful, there isn't much to Ozai. All he wanted in life was to conquer the world and be a dick to his son. A tale as old as time. Because of the lack of originality with Ozai, I believe Azula is the better villain. Now comes the hard part, choosing between Azula and Zahir. Both have a place in our hearts, but the winner is Zahir. His motives were fascinating, his methods were brutal, and if that wasn't enough, the dude could f***ing fly. Winner, Legend of Korra, by a razor's edge. Before they began working on The Last Airbender, the creators had mapped out a plan on how they wanted the series to play out. They centered each season around Aang learning a new element so he could defeat the Fire Lord and save the world. The series finale provided a huge payoff and might be the most satisfying ending to a series I've ever seen. Meanwhile, the original plan for Legend of Korra was to only have 1 season. However, halfway through production, Nickelodeon ordered 3 more to be made. This led the creators to treat each season as its own individual story. The central piece stringing the seasons together was Korra's journey. We see her go from a hothead who thinks she can fix any problem by herself, to someone so broken by the evils of the world she's almost unrecognizable. Eventually she learns to face her fears and accepts who she is. Having your main character deal with issues like PTSD and depression is a brave move for a kid's show. I admit, I didn't appreciate it enough when I was originally watching it as a teenager. But now I will defend Korra and the show anytime someone has something bad to say about it. With that said, Korra's development came at a cost. The other characters were often treated as props whose sole purpose was to fill time or help tell Korra's story. Look at the members of her team. Mako went from being an important character to an errand boy for the most annoying person in the show. The only thing that changed about Bolin is he found himself a nice girlfriend. I'm happy for him, but I expected something more. Side note on Bolin, I thought it was super weird how he was basically a Hitler Youth in Season 4. I know he's not the brightest, but it took him way too long to catch on. Meanwhile, Asami continued to be amazing at everything, and also found herself a nice girlfriend. I know it's harder to develop side characters, but many shows have done it. One of the best examples is, of course, Zuko from The Last Airbender. Despite playing second fiddle to Aang, he managed to go from aggro narc to one of the most likable characters in a show full of likable characters. To this day, I still haven't found a redemption arc I enjoy more. Jaime from Game of Thrones had a chance, but we all know how that ends. Thanks to Zuko being awesome, The Last Airbender wins this round. The stories are well written, and the characters are unforgettable. But without the bending, neither of these shows would have gained a foothold in pop culture. Anyone who watched these as a kid and says they never tried to shoot fire from their hands is a liar. For the best fight in Legend of Korra, I'm going with Tenzin versus Zahir and his goons. Throughout most of Legend of Korra, Tenzin was a disappointment with regards to bending. He had a few moments where we got to see pieces of what he could do, but he had a lot to live up to, being the offspring of both the Avatar and one of the most powerful waterbenders we've ever seen. All that changed when he faced off against Zahir at the Northern Air Temple. Zahir was an intimidating dude. The show hyped him up to seem more dangerous than any other person on the planet, and that was before he could airbend. So seeing Tenzin outclass him was stunning. But what really set this fight apart was that when Tenzin ended up fighting a 4v1 where he had no chance of winning, he didn't back down. No lie, the scene sometimes gives me goosebumps.
It's over.
As long as I'm breathing, it's not over.
For the last Airbender, the choice is, of course, Zuko versus Azula, aka the last Agni Kai. Fights are always better when they're personal, and it's hard to get more personal than a sibling rivalry. Zuko and Azula always hated each other, and this fight determined once and for all who was the best. Oh, and the winner got to claim the Fire Nation throne and determine the fate of a 100-year war. The stakes were as big as they can be, but another factor was the fight itself. The choreography was gorgeous. The contrasting blue and red fires, boosted by Sozin's comet, made it one of the most visually stunning anime fights I've ever seen. Each of them slid around and shot fireballs as big as the energy blast from Dragon Ball Z, causing the palace they were fighting for to catch a blaze. The showrunners could have gone with a fast-paced music for the scene, but chose a more somber score to hammer home the fact that it was tragic that family would treat each other this way. My only complaint is how it ends. After Zuko sacrifices himself to save Katara, it's her that gets to deliver the final blow. It would have felt more complete if Zuko had finished it himself. So what's the best way to determine which of these fights is better? It's easy. If you're like me, whenever you get the urge to see some bending, but don't have time to watch the show, the solution is to search for clips on YouTube. And every time I type a Y into my browser search bar, it autocompletes to a URL for the battle between Zuko and Azula, making it the winner of this round. It was a close match, but The Last Airbender managed to edge out Legend of Korra. There have been some rumors that Nickelodeon did some meddling in Legend of Korra, which could have caused it to not reach its full potential. Regardless, there is no shame coming in second to one of the greatest shows ever created. And if I'm being honest, the real winner is all of us, because we have two amazing shows to watch over and over again. Do you agree with the results? Or do you think I'm a moron? I think I know the answer, but let me know anyways.